Hey guys, welcome back. I'm Ruben Gomez, the host of the Seasonal Movement podcast, and I'm excited for you to be here. I'm very excited for our guest. He is pretty cool. I was checking his social media, and I can't wait to have a good conversation and bring a new insight and new angle to things that perhaps you have heard about, but from a different perspective. The name of our guest today is Rom Za. He is a first degree Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. So don't mess around. Don't mess around with him. He's a holistic performance coach and the founder of the Rom Z. Am I saying that right, Rom? Z?
Z
Z.
A, like
So the
pizza.
pizza. Okay. Rom Z method. A system that helps athletes, entrepreneurs, executives, and patients rebuild their bodies and nervous system to perform for life. Wow, I love that. After being told by doctors that he never compete again, jiu-jitsu, that's what he specialized in, due to multiple spinal injuries, Rom spent years studying breathwork, fascia, and ancestral recovery methods and built a system that helped him return to the mats and to living life better than ever. I love that. I do believe that we're over working out in the gym and fascia. When you say fascia, I see strength and power right there. And also, today he teaches the Tao of Jiu-Jitsu. So, the Tao of Jiu-Jitsu, breakthrough breakwork and the bulletproof body. So I love Taoism, so I know we're gonna get into it. His programs integrate ancient wisdom with modern performance science. We're speaking the same language here, man. To help people move, breathe, and live with power and longevity. Welcome to the podcast, Rom. How are you today?
I'm doing excellent. Excellent. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So you're joining us from where are you from? Tell me again.
The mountains of Idaho.
Ooh, I'm a little jealous, right? So I'm in Omaha, Nebraska. I think that we might be experiencing similar weather when it comes down to the winters. We're transitioning into the fall and pretty much already in the middle of the fall into the winter. So I look forward asking you a few questions today that I've been thinking about. So I was checking your social media and you do quite a bit. I saw kind of like the evolution and I see the jiu-jitsu behind everything you do, but more importantly, oligistic methods that perhaps are overlooked when it comes down to training, right? Like when we think about training and hitting the mats, sometimes we think about like doing more, or like lifting heavier. And I think that your approach really, I have practiced something similar in the past. I think it's like the right way to go about training. So if we start by our bodies, let's just focus on our bodies for now. What makes your approach more sustainable and the actual way of going about building better bodies? Not just stronger, but better bodies.
Yeah. So when we focus on just attributes like strength and speed and explosiveness and endurance, all of those things could be beneficial or they could be harmful, depending on the dosage. So too much strength, now you're stiff. Uh, too much endurance, well, now you probably have problems with your joints.
Hmm.
I mean, we can keep going down that route, but essentially, like human movement breaks down into obviously patterns. Like we have lots of different patterns, but underlying the human movement patterns, we have breathing. Like when we sleep, we breathe. When we fornicate and make babies, we breathe. When we train, we breathe. When we eat, we breathe. When we have a baby that's born, we know it's a viable baby when it takes its first breath. When we have somebody die, we know that that person is not viable anymore because they're not breathing. So it the breath also holds the pressure. It pressurizes the body so that when you look at the body in a way like where it's like a can of soda, for example. So it's like a can of soda. It doesn't get its strength from the can. It gets its strength from the pressure. So that if we don't breathe properly, we have a lot of problems that start to manifest. Like I from the studies that I read in the United States, uh, joint problems, like including the spine, including the knees and shoulders, joint problems um, have more spending financially than heart disease and diabetes combined. So a lot of that has to do with people not being able to breathe properly and not being able to pressurize their body and protect their spine. I mean, a lot of it also has to do with people don't move at all. And if they do move, they do something ultra repetitive. Like, for example, you mentioned baseball. Like baseball players, like if I see a baseball player, I know what kind of injuries they're going to have for the most part. If I see a jiu-jitsu athlete, I know what kind of injuries they're going to have because human beings for from the age of beginning of human beings, whenever that was, maybe we were, I don't know, right? Like, I think we were here for a really long time. Maybe not
200,
in our
200,000 years at least.
yeah, at least. So it's like we've always been generalists. So like we walk, we run, we crawl, we climb, we swim, we throw, we we do stuff, we make stuff with our hands. And nowadays it's become very specialized. So if you are even like an athlete or a practitioner, you're a specialist. Like you do the same exact thing over and over and over again, and that's why eventually you have to retire with crippling injuries. So my approach basically works on first optimizing the breath to be the highest level that you can possibly be, focusing on the biomechanics. Because when you breathe properly, your stress response becomes actually human. Like you stop reacting to life um, in a way as if a saber-toothed tiger is chasing you, because that's what's going on. Like I work with a lot of people in the business world and the entrepreneurial world, and the thing is, most of them, like, it doesn't matter how successful they are, once they reach that success, they're scared that they're going to lose it. So they start living in this like fear mindset, but it doesn't stem from a mindset, it stems from their body. So we start with the breath, and then we move into fascia, and we move into sinews and connective tissue, because most of those things have been forgotten in, or just never brought up in modern day culture. I mean, for example, like the fascia just got its first anatomy textbook in 2018. So
Hmm.
for thousands of years, they've been doing cadavers and ripping out the fascia, which is like almost 50 pounds or 22 kilos inside of the body, and throwing it out and saying that it's useless. It's just human stuffing, they would say. And now they're finding the research from China, from India, and from Russia is a little bit
Mhm.
more forward thinking, but
Yeah.
they talk about how fascia dysfunction doesn't just lead to deterioration of the connective tissue. So, for example, like if you have a foot problem, it can lead to a neck problem down the line. Kind of like I use the analogy, if you get a crack on your windshield, it doesn't stay there, it eventually spreads. It's the
Hmm.
same thing with the fascia. And, but what's more interesting is that two other studies, one of them was talking about how anxiety and depression are linked to fascia dysfunction.
Mm.
And then the second one specifically talked about oncological diseases being linked to fascia dysfunction as well. So cancers, uh, and it's really interesting to think that we have all these pharmaceutical pseudo solutions, and
Hmm.
yet it's just like the issues are in our tissues all along.
I agree. So I found out recently I have a little bit of fascia pain. So I play baseball, and I mean there's so much that you just uncover there. I wanna highlight a few things from a practical perspective. I play baseball in the summer, and we just finished our season about 3 weeks ago. And by the end of the season, I started catching a lot more. So, like you say, specialist. I became a specialist back again. Not at like an excessive rate, but enough that at my age, I started getting some little bit of back pain on my lower back. And the only attribute I can give to it is the swinging with trying to swing with power from the hips and so on, and then the catching, right? So I went for 3 weeks kind of ignoring that pain perhaps. It's like, oh, it should kind of go away and so on. And I kind of neglected the breathing and the stretching. So when we're talking about stretching, breathing comes with it. It's becoming conscious of breathing into that pain, at least the way I practice it. And finally, I'm like, I gotta do something about it. So I just start researching a little bit. And what I thought it was kind of like muscular, perhaps, I realized is fascia. Because in that area of the body, in kind of like in the middle of your lower back, there is a lot of fascia there that holds stuff together. And I started looking into it. And again, I went back into the breathing and the stretching. Actually, that's what I was doing before getting into this call. And it's so quick how our bodies can adapt and react positively, both positively and negative. But I want to highlight the positive when we actually go into the right type of care, self care. Now, I want to highlight this. When it comes down to training, I'm a baseball guy, so I am into yearly programming, and I want to highlight this out because, as you mentioned, as we specialize and do the same thing over and over and over, and this is, I see this most happening not on athletes, because athletes are conscious of their body and we have to compensate for that specialization, but on the common people out there. So most people now, they think about exercise, about going to the gym, right? And it's just pure strength. So when it comes down to mobility, mobility is being lost. When it comes down to fascia and joint strength, is completely lost as well. Like it's kind of like the muscle grows stronger than the joints, and then the joints injure, arthritis shows up. And I just want to highlight this out because I'm the seasonal guy, right? So I see seasons as everywhere in our life, how we can go season after season to avoid that specialization. So I like to do yearly programming. And when it comes down to movement, this is the time of the year that I go back to number one, rehab from the season. Pretty much it's like go to the basics, like work on those muscles or joints that started to experience pain or started to lose mobility, because those are like the weak links that I develop over the year. And then I go into mobility, and then that's when I go into a strength work. And it's kind of like a combination. Like I'm not going to break down my yearly programming, but the importance of breaking your exercise throughout your year so that you don't become stiff or you don't become slow, or all these issues that come with doing the same thing over and over and over again. Now I do want to ask you a question about high performance people that reach a certain level and then they are afraid of losing that. I want to ask this from a seasonal perspective, because when you're talking about Taoism, I'm like, I know you're gonna get this. When we enter into the winter, it's not about doing nothing or doing less. It's about doing things differently. And that season of the winter, as humans, we experience that. Perhaps we go inwards a little more, perhaps we're more introverted a little bit. And when it comes down to the economy and work, the amount of work that is out there, for some people, that kind of goes down a little bit. So what I like to go into is perhaps you have noticed some sort of relation between seasons and how people react to those slowing down seasons, and how their sympathetic and parasympathetic system absorbs that information, and it all comes about perception, right? So I just want to see if you have something on the tank there where we can go seasonally a little bit when it comes down to parasympathetic and sympathetic optimization, perhaps, and balance.
Yeah. So most people, I would say at least 80% of people, and I say that because 80% of human beings on the planet supposedly live in a metropolis, which means that they're in a big city and they're pretty much disconnected from nature. So the way that we're programmed, like I grew up in New York City, and the way that we're programmed is there is no seasons. Like you're
Mm-hmm.
just go. You just go.
Yes.
Summer, go. Winter, go harder because that's
Yes.
Q4. And now
Mm-hmm.
you have to make up whatever the losses were maybe during the fall. Like if you think about it, where do most of the sales come from in in the United States and probably even the world. It's like Black Friday, it's
Hmm.
Christmas, it's New Year's, so on and so forth. So when we think about, and that's the peak of the season of the winter, right?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
like
Like,
we
it's
go into,
inverse.
yeah, so we go into the winter solstice, but now we're supposed to be grinding even harder. So
Yeah,
I believe that most people are completely disconnected with the flow of life because they're disconnected from nature. Most people don't even step on soil. Like they don't
agree.
have soil. Most people don't see a horizon because they have buildings that are so tall around them. So it's we're so disconnected, and that's where a lot of our sickness comes from, is because we're constantly as a culture um, trying to optimize the wrong things. We are optimizing in a way that's not sustainable. So it's like, okay, you're a high performer, but if you can only be a high performer for 36 months, 48 months, 60 months, and then
Hmm.
the rest of the time you're burnt out, well,
Yeah,
there's a problem there. Like seasons definitely play a huge role with what we consume, whether that's food or types of water or even content. Seasons should play a role with all of that because it's also not natural, right? Like you live in Omaha, Nebraska, and I live in Idaho, and I have access to bananas whenever I want, right? So there's a distinction there that like we're completely
disconnected.
disconnected from. Yeah, we're just disconnected from the flow of life. Like everything is a convenience, and you don't need to abide by the seasons because you have fluorescent lights and you have bananas available to you all the time, and you don't farm, you don't do anything like as humans. So it's like why should you care about um the seasons? And I'll tell you why you should care is because not caring makes you sick. It makes
Hmm.
you dysfunctional. It makes you constantly stuck in a sympathetic state because your
Hmm.
body, it's known this for millions of years, probably, or at
Yeah.
least hundreds of thousands of years. And the reality is, like, nothing's changed biologically. You've just become a worse human. Like our necks are
Yeah.
developing new structures because of this.
Yeah.
Because of this, like we're optimizing to be able to do this, and they give it like these cute names, like text neck or text thumbs, or it's so absurd. Where it's just like, no, that's a sickness, that's a dysfunction, that's a disease, and if it's not addressed, imagine what the people of the future will look and function like. So the more we go away from the seasons, the sicker we become.
Well, they're gonna look a lot bigger. That has been the trend, and a lot sicker. That has been the
And
trend.
like curved.
And curve, yeah, like the yin yang curve is kind of what I'm imagining, tilting forwards. But yeah, I think you hit on a lot of things that I agree on, and the reason that I'm doing the work I'm doing. I do have a point from your earlier comment about fascia pain and depression, the link. Now, what I want to turn this in is because I actually just made a post recently, and I made decisions thinking on this. I just got a new pair of boots that are open toe, kind of more
Minimalist.
natural and ergonomical, because I realized that I have that in the summer but I don't have that in the winter, kind of like my winter clothes. I just went through it and got rid of everything that is extremely uncomfortable. And the way this relates to fascia is that we use different gear in the summer and in the winter. It's easy in the summer to be comfortable because most likely you're wearing shorts and you're barefoot and you're out there in nature. In the winter, you have to wear a little bit more gear, and usually that comes at a cost. Like it's either heavier or it's a little more constricting. You don't get, as much contact to nature. There's all sorts of reasons why. But when it comes down to fascia, is that we kind of hold that position. Like if we're wearing the same jacket that is heavy, our shoulders, instead of being wide and open, are constrained, right? So I do see, and I have experience by looking into seasonal affective disorder, the winter blue, body pain is the beginning, or is part of the process. But even just if everything's going great in your life, if you have body pain, especially going into the winter season, it tends to accelerate. It tends to
100%.
become bigger and it becomes an issue. So when you're talking about depression and fascia, I'm like, I agree 100%.
Yeah. Well, you're also probably sitting around more in the winter time. You're getting less sun, right? So your
Yeah,
body's producing a lot less testosterone, a lot less
correct.
vitamin D you're taking in. I mean, there's so many like little elements that make such a big deal. So if people are living in a like we live in a northern climate, so we have very heavy winters. So, but every day we try to go out and get some sun. Like every
Hmm.
day we go in the sauna. Every day I mean, even in the wintertime, we'll have like 4 feet of snow and we're walking around barefoot in the wintertime just to stay
Nice,
connected, you know,
nice.
just to also remember what it's like to be human before all the comforts, you
Correct.
know?
Yeah, I love it. So there's a few things there. I do have an exercise that I go through. So when the seasons start shifting, you're talking a lot about subconscious or instincts. You're talking a lot of my language here, and I just want to highlight this that we used to prepare for the winter. If you didn't prepare, you die. Period. Now, how do we realize that we have to prepare is by cortisol, stress. Like the weather start changing, we get, the cold start showing up, the days start getting shorter, we get the first blow from the northern side, and your brain picks that up. As you mentioned, our biology is 200,000 plus years old, but now we live in an environment that we don't need to prepare that much. Like if you own a house, you do have to prepare a little bit, but people that live in apartments, there is nothing other than having some boots, jeans, and even that, people sometimes don't even pay attention to that. So what is interesting is when we're talking sympathetic, parasympathetic system, the winter transition, the transition into the fall signals a response in our parasympathetic system to go, or sympathetic, I apologize, to go into a state of alertness. So now when we're talking about grounding, grounding usually let that go, right? Like grounding bring us back to balance. But again, we're talking about in the winter, there is not much of that going on. Now when we're talking about movement again, movement will help. I play basketball in the winter so I can increase my testosterone production, so I can sweat and move a lot. But again, that kind of goes out of the picture for most people. The amount of movement just goes down naturally. So it's like we have like this perfect storm, which is just a natural response to the winter, and then the society that we live into, the technological advances that got us to this place.
Yeah. Well, and they eat more too, which is also unnatural because in the
Yeah,
winter
and we
time
eat.
you're
Yeah, and we eat more. Yeah, that's the thing is that as I look at metabolic states, we actually spend a little more of our fat reserves of our energy, like our metabolism, or not our metabolism, but our metabolic state speeds up a little bit in the winter. So we're supposed to lose a little bit of weight, perhaps, but obviously, due to our instincts, we get more cravings because
yeah.
we want to have more energy, because if we can make sure that we have plenty of energy, we're going to survive the winter. That's our brain talking 200,000 years ago, and it still does to this day. So guess
Yeah.
what we do? We just eat more, and then five pounds later the winter is over, if not 10 pounds later, right?
100%. Well, because also when your nervous system is dysregulated, you crave more
Mhm.
unhealthy foods. Like if you want to see how like what's bad for you, think about when you're stressed what you crave. And that would be like a clear distinction for you as a mirror to be like, oh, like I probably shouldn't be eating that right now because it also creates like that cycle, right?
Yes.
Um, yeah. So like, and then, I mean, think about it like moving forward into the future. Let's say you're 20 years old and you gain 5 pounds in the winter time. Every winter you gain 5 pounds. Well,
Yes,
by the time you're 40, you're 100 pounds heavier. That's another human that you added on top of you.
I agree, and that saying goes back to if you have a bad season in the winter, which some people experience, that it's like, oh, the winter sucks, I just gotta get through it. That's 1/4 of your life. So I guess that is my interest when we're combining all these things, all these little factors. It's not about just a biohack, because I can tell you right away, I have my happy light in front of me, but this happy light is not really solving all the issues that come up, perhaps. And it's not really an issue, it's just a combination of our society and the winter environment. Because I can tell you, well, let's get an infrared lamp. Let's get a treadmill on our desk so we can walk while we work and increase our movement. Let's do all these things. But in reality, going back to the basics, like you're talking, sleep, exercise, nutrition, it's kind of like an approach, a combined effort when it comes down to outdoor connection. The reason you're saying that is because it's healthy for you, right? Like it's like free medicine. And how can we look at those seasonally? Because what we're doing in the summer works for the summer. What also works for the winter, or what works for the spring? And the reason that I think that's important is because the environment changes. And when the environment changes, we need to adapt with it.
100%. Yeah, I mean, most people, the question for me, for most people would be like, who would you be without all of your biohacks and without all of your supplements? What if the world economic like material chain collapsed and you had nothing, like it's happened in Venezuela in the past, like it's happened in Soviet Russia in the past? What would you do to adapt? Like, what if you didn't have all of those things, right? So, um, yeah, like there's definitely like biohacks that you can use. Like we use UVA and UVB bulbs every
Mhm.
winter. So when I lived in Wyoming, I lived in Star Valley and we had overcast skies for 3 months at a time. So, and I didn't understand what's going on because before that I lived in Costa Rica for 5 years and before that I was in New York. So it's like we kind of always had sun.
Mhm.
But yeah, I started tanning my chest, my back, my balls, and that changed like my winter downstate. Um, yeah, I mean, in the wintertime, like we eat heavier meats. We eat,
Yeah.
we also eat more grains. We eat less fruits because we just don't have, like, we only have access to fruit that we've canned or that we've recently picked and that's still fresh. But outside of that, it's going to be like grain and meat and things that warm up my body as opposed to fruit that cool my body in the summertime.
Correct.
Um, yeah, or it's just like people are like, oh, I want to drink coconut milk. Where it's just like, bro, you live in a northern climate. Like, what do you? First of all, it's like how much resources have to go into you
Yeah.
getting access to coconuts, and then two, it's like it doesn't even make sense. Like, you don't need to cool anything down. You're cold already. Like, if you look at
Yeah.
traditional Chinese medicine, they
Yeah.
talk about dampness and coolness and heat,
Hmm.
and they understand seasonality because they evolved their science because traditional
Hmm.
Chinese medicine is a
Yeah.
science and so is
Yes.
Ayurveda, right? And
Hmm.
they evolved that science with the elements that
Yes.
we've complete, like what are our elements? Lithium batteries and fluorescent lights, and polyester,
Polyester, yeah,
fluorescent
you
lights
can't
and
live
lithium
without
batteries for
that.
sure.
We'll be naked. So the that brings something that I saw on your social media that I think is part also of what I'm trying to create. Let's talk about balance and harmony, because essentially the subject that came up and the picture that we painted is actually living in harmony with the seasons. It's not living in balance with the seasons, right? So perhaps you might be able to articulate the difference between harmony and balance, and when we should be striving for one or the other. I think it's a fascinating subject because not many people is using the word harmony, but you
Yeah.
hear balance everywhere.
Yeah. Well, it's cheap. Balance is cheap, right? And people don't even understand balance because they've never even worked on their balance. If we talk about the movement perspective, and we think about balance, it's a constant state of flux.
I
Like there's
agree.
no such thing as balance because if you look at my foot when I'm balancing in an asana, let's say, or I'm balancing on a slack line,
The slack
you
line.
look at you look at all the fascia, you look at all of like my small little bones in my feet, and they're just constantly moving. There's no such thing as perfect balance for a sustainable amount of time. Now, harmony, you can be in harmony. Harmony is a state of flow. So harmony is a state of peace. And I break it down into 7 layers. So when I think of harmony, I don't think of just one big thing. I think about harmonizing different layers and then it comes into harmony. So the first layer is the physical body. It's kind of like what we touched upon: breathing, movement, nutrition, what's coming in, the consumption. The next level is the emotional body. where am I with my emotions? Like, where am I? How am I feeling? What is causing me to feel these things? How in control am I of my internal state? The next one is my thoughts, right? My psychological harmony. Am I? Do I? They say that human beings have 90% of the same thoughts every single day, and most of them are negative.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting because it's
Hmm.
just like, if you're not in, that's disharmony. Like, that's basically like disharmony. If you have a constant negative stream of thoughts, then you're in disharmony. Then we go into the spiritual layer, and the spiritual layer doesn't have to be like a man in a robe with a beard that kind of looks like you, but
An apostle.
no, it's connection to something bigger than you. Maybe it's community, maybe it's nature, maybe it is a church or some sort of religious organization, maybe it's a cult, whatever you're into. Um, the next layer would be like relational. Do you have harmony in your relationships? The next layer would be environmental, which is kind of like what we've been touching on. Like, are you in harmony with your environment? Do you have enough firewood to last you for the winter?
Yeah.
Um, then the last layer, which is something that I've thought about in the last year, is the digital layer. Are you in harmony in the digital layer of your life? Because that is one that the Tao doesn't talk about.
It
That is
wasn't
one that,
invented by then. Yeah.
yeah, that is one. Well, because it, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if any culture has ever been sick enough to invent something of the sort of like our digital interconnectedness and disconnectedness at the same time. Like,
Hmm.
this is incredible, right? Like, what we're doing is incredible.
Yeah.
Having this conversation, it's beautiful. Like, we can have a conversation across the world. And also, it's terrible because we can't have this conversation in person,
Yes.
because it's just like everybody's too busy. Everybody's
Hmm.
like stuck in disharmony, right? To be able to be present, to be connected, to be at peace. That's what I would consider the few words that I would describe that harmonious spiral through
Yeah.
those layers, going all
Like
the way up and
something like
out.
this.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
I am excited because I do have a live event today, and we don't get to do many of those. But when you do those and you get to connect with the people, and the energy is, it just feels completely different. You can't recreate that. And I love how you have described, because I describe it very similar, the difference between balance and harmony. And I never hear it, but yeah, balance is cheap. The reality is that we are only in balance a few times in our life. When we're dead is one of them. But when you look at the yin yang, I love looking at the yin yang, and it's a really good visual of many things in life. One of them is the yin yang is in harmony, is not in balance. There's only two spots during the yin yang that is in complete balance, which is right in the middle and right at the end, and the rest is all in harmony. So what I believe is that sometimes we have to let go of some parts of our life, or some behaviors, of some habits, so that we can compensate and be in harmony. But what is important to know is, number one, what is your environment like? And then what is your biology like who you are? And then that's what's going to allow you to be able to kind of like jive back and forward, so that you go, it's perhaps not a straight line, it's when you're selling, right? But it is in rhythm and it's in flow. So I absolutely love that. And the reason I bring that is because the Tao, right? The Tao, like there's such beauty on it. You just mentioned how well, Chinese traditional medicine, India, and then Russia. It is a science what they have developed, but somehow we don't treat it as such. And I'm guilty of that. I call it a philosophy, but it is a science. And early on, you were talking about how they are a little more advanced, if not, well, a little, I think is too little, a lot more advanced when it comes down to the fascia. And not just fascia, but also energies. When it comes down to the Eastern philosophy of, we have energy, we have meridians in our body, and that when you're talking about breathing, essentially we want to unclog those systems, right? So that energy flows. So what I think that is interesting is that when you are on a slack line, you are not on balance, you are in a state of harmony, and that's kind of pretty much how life is. Now, when I look at the year, we acknowledge that there is a curve down and a curve up, the yin yang, and that is how our seasons should live. So, in a state of hustle, you mentioned you grew up in New York, and I grew up in Venezuela. It's pretty busy down there compared to where I am now. It's like this mindset of hustle, 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 hustle. Look where it gets us. Like we are sick. So when it comes down to being a state of harmony, we have to let go of some of that new age kind of living. The light on our faces 24/7. That's not the natural way of living. So I want to know from your perspective, um, in jiu-jitsu, right? We want to use and the opponent's energy. We want to leverage. I think that when we are in harmony, what we're doing is paying attention to what is the energy like so that we can leverage it instead of forcing something that is when we're trying to be on balance. It's like, wait, 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 I'm going to the right. Let me force my way into the left so I can stay in balance. Instead of that, how can we leverage our environment to achieve more with less effort?
Well, the first part is to understand who you are and how you operate best. We're all different, right? It's like some of us have more melanin and we require and we can handle possibly more sun. Some of us can't, right? So if we just look at it from like the psycho biological, spiritual perspective, and also cultural perspective, like we're all going to need something different. But jujitsu is, for me at least, it's an expression of my soul. Like the way that I roll is the way that I be, like my way of being. And I see that all the time when I'm rolling with people. I tell people all the time, like how you breathe is how you live. How you do jujitsu is how you live. It's not about the your technical proficiency. It's more about your way of being underneath all of the technique. So when I look at that, I always look at. I'm constantly diagnosing, right? Because like I am a healer and a practitioner, so I'm constantly looking at certain gaps. So when we talk about harmony, for me, when I do jujitsu, I like to play many different games. One of the things that I like to do is create disharmony and chaos. So I function really well in chaos because I was raised in a state of chaos. Like I was a refugee of war, and then I grew up in Brooklyn. So like I had all of these reference points, and my nervous system evolved through this inconsistent state of chaos. So when I create chaos in jiu-jitsu, I know where it's going to lead to. So I basically create a trap. So when I think about jiu-jitsu, I create traps and then I catch the mouse in the trap that I'm looking for and that's harmony, right? Like now we've created a loop and we've created closure. But at first I create disharmony and I create so much disharmony that they can't handle it. And then they're looking for a solution and they run to the cheese knowing that there's a trap there, but there's no other solution. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. So that makes sense. So you're letting go of the need to be in harmony, knowing that that's a strategy to arrive to it. That's
Exactly.
beautiful. That's beautifully said. Yes.
Exactly. And also because it is on one end a competitive, but also on the other end a cooperative environment in a jiu-jitsu role. What I'm creating is basically I'm trying to see what their capacity is for chaos,
Hmm.
and then I am leading them to the trap, basically, in a very gentle way, because I don't want to hurt people. I want to kill people, but I don't want to hurt them. And I'll explain. Like in jiu-jitsu, when you tap out, that's you saying, you killed me, let's restart. But if
Hmm.
we're training and I hurt you, you might not tap out, but
Hmm.
you might not train for the next 6 to 12 months.
Yes.
Does that make
I
sense? So
agree.
I want to be a
That's
ninja.
beautiful. Yes, no, that I'm just taking my kid to karate, and I know that he's learning some of that, and it's beautiful. Like knowing that you have the power and use it wisely, use it in a way that won't hurt others. And I think more importantly, the real question here is that won't hurt ourselves, because like
That's first and
that's
foremost.
literally what we're talking about. We have all that power with all the technology, but are we hurting ourselves? So the same way that you just mentioned how there's all these layers that we want to have in harmony. I think that we both look at it based on our experiences, based on our memories, based on our life, and come up to a way to arrive to alignment. I think alignment becomes like this end part, like the end of the line. And once you're in alignment, now you can flow. So there's so many things that come
Yes.
with it.
Yeah, well, because there's no obstacles. Like when you're aligned, you've moved the obstacles out of the way through that spiral that we're working through in those 8 layers. And
Hmm.
then you're moving towards the direction that your soul has purpose to move towards.
I
Um,
agree.
like like we all there's a part deep down inside of us, I think when we're children, that we know what we came here to do. And
Hmm.
it's to be present, and it's to play, and it's to create through play. And I think that through all of these layers that we get programmed through, like through family and their traumas and their inaccurate ways of living, and then through school, and then through more school and more school,
Hmm.
and then corporate culture, if you went down,
Yes.
and even athletics, right? Like
Oh,
uh,
athletics, big one.
it's a huge one, and people miss that one. And then religion, right? But
Yeah.
athletics is also like everything is constantly trying to form you to be um, the best version of what they want you to be, as opposed to
Correct.
what you came here to be. So when you're in alignment, you, as a man specifically, when you step into your warrior archetype, you cut away everything that doesn't belong. And
Mm.
that helps to get into a state of alignment. It starts the process to it, at least.
So you mentioned a few things here. You just mentioned archetype when you achieve your state of warrior. I think I have here that state of warrior. But what is important to me more than the specific is that you have your way to help people find themselves, right? Like that is a big one, I believe, is that how can we have a framework to allow people to find themselves into it instead of us telling them, this is what you're supposed to do, this is what you can do, this is what you should do. No, it's like here is a framework so that you can find number one who you are, and from there we will build, right? Like unless you know who you are, then in which direction are you gonna go? Because I'm not gonna sit here to tell you what to do when I don't even know who you are. Let's find out that first.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Now, I also think that the layer that comes either before or at the same time is our environment, understanding our environment at a high level. So if we understand our environment, if we understand ourselves, and that's when the season comes in place, our environment is seasonal. Now we can play with how can we remove all these interruptions, all these blockages so that we can enter into alignment. So it is interesting because I have the seasons framework, which is sleep, eat, activate, move, exercise. That's just kind of one. Uh, um, Outdoor connection, social dynamics, relationships, and then novelty. And we're kind of hitting on pretty much the same important pillars based on what you mentioned perhaps 15 minutes ago. But I believe that when we can align those, that in a way removes, I would say, 90% of the biological. I'm not talking about mindsets, this and that, but a big portion of those blockages go away because now you can feel better. Now you can recover. Now you can ground and calibrate your systems. And all of them are pretty much free.
100%. Yeah. I mean, think about all the loops that people get stuck in: mental, emotional, like the psychological and emotional loops. They're going to be focused on three things for the most part. They're always thinking about money, they're always thinking about health, and they're always thinking about relationships. That's it. Like
Mhm.
those are the three big loops. If you can handle and create harmony in those three areas, you're golden, right? And this goes back to alignment, right? Like in this culture that we live in, you can create value based on who you are and what you bring to the world, right? In other cultures, maybe you weren't able to do that. Maybe you didn't have the opportunity for upwards growth. But in this culture, in the United States, currently in its current state of existence, you can still do that. You can buy a microphone, you can buy a camera, you might even already have a camera. You might be doing this on your phone. So it's like you can create alignment there. You can create alignment in your health, doing the things that you just mentioned and what we've been talking about. You can create alignment in your relationships. And when you figure out who you are, you can actually start to figure out who you want to be in relationship with. Because that's another thing that we are in right now. We have absolutely the lowest amount of community that we've ever had in the history of this planet. We used to be some sort of hunter-gatherer tribe at the tip of the number was around 150, let's say. Maybe let's say it was 20 to 50. Regardless, most men say they don't even have one friend that they can go talk to. So
Mm.
if we're talking about and the reason for that is because like they don't even know how to attract those friends. They don't know how to attract those friends because they don't even know what they want and who they are and what they stand for, because most people don't stand for anything. So it creates like these layers, and it's very profitable for the system for us to
Oh
be
yeah.
in those places, because if you have a problem with health, money, and relationships, you are going to spend all of your health, money, and relationships trying to
Hmm.
fix those problems. So
Yes.
Amazon, go, 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 go,
Hmm.
smoke,
Yeah.
drink, sex, porn, anything to to soothe that deep, deep existential doom that we feel as humans from the disharmony that's been created environmentally, culturally, religiously, whatever.
Hmm.
Does that make sense?
I I agree, and I think the sad part is that it's not just profitable because we're gonna spend all our money on the doctor, the psychologist, where we could have that conversation with a friend. But nowadays, marketing takes so much advantage of that because we want to be accepted, we want to be in community, we want to be on a clan, and that gives us some sort of sense of tranquility. And then people is just spending money and money and money and money to just achieve that through some sort of synthetic plastic community, perhaps. And it's sad. It absolutely is. But I agree to it. Now, there is a word that you use in one of your. I hear one of your speaking engagements. You use resilience, and I am that word comes a lot based on the work that I do. You know, resilience, I guess, against the seasons and the winter and this and that. And I try to stay away from it because I think that it kind of brings like a little bit of force to it.
For sure.
But the way that you use it is resilience versus fragile. So I want to go into that concept because the way you explain it actually shows how not through being strong or rigid, but through flexing, again, jiu-jitsu, right? Leveraging is how you actually can embody resilience. So I would love to hear that from you.
Yeah. So in the Tao, they talk about suppleness. You want to be as supple as a baby. Um, when you are supple, you can actually exhibit power. So if I'm loose, I can punch faster. I
Mm-hmm.
can be more precise. So going back to the word resilience, when I think of resilience, I think of like a tough Mexican boxer that just gets his head bashed in, but he doesn't fall. When I think of fragility, I think of like a glass container. And then there's a third word coined by Nicholas Taleb, called anti-fragile. So anti-fragility is the ability to become better through stress, chaos, and change. That's what we're looking for. So, I mean, a lot of people use the word resilient, and I think it's fine. I just think it's it's a it's the wrong word, because what
Mm.
we're really looking for is to become not resilient but adaptable,
I
to be
agree.
able to adapt to change, to chaos, to stress. Because they people always joke, oh, there's only two things that are guaranteed. It's death and taxes, but that's not true. Death for sure is guaranteed. Taxes aren't for a lot of people, but it's stress and change. Like, you're going to be stressed, things are going to change, and there's going to be chaos. Like, those are all, I would say, synonymous words, like stress, change, chaos. They're all exactly the same. Entropy, we can use another one. But when you develop yourself in a way that you're able to bounce back from stressors, like real stressors, like, okay, for example, let's say a war starts and you have to flee where you live. Like, war is a huge stressor. Divorce is a huge stressor. Death in the family is a huge stressor. Bankruptcy is a huge stressor. Shit, it doesn't even have to go into the negative. Starting a business and becoming successful is a huge stressor. Winning a
Yeah.
championship and becoming a world champion is a huge stressor. Um,
Mhm.
just chasing your dreams could be a huge stressor. So the ability to become adaptable is essentially, I would always break it down into a biological quality, because I talked about all those other layers, right? But the most important ones, I believe, because, like, yes, the environment is the environment. We have to learn the environment, but we're also limited to how much we can control the environment. But we're not limited, more or less, more or less, I say that with like an asterisk, with how much we can control our biological environment. So our physical body, our emotional body, and our psychological body. So it's like, if we can control those three, everything else kind of becomes easier, because everything that we do is based on who we are in this moment, like how strong our immune system is, how strong
Mhm.
our joints are, how you mentioned energy, right? Like the Chinese and the Indians, they spoke about energy a lot. Well, that's the next layer after fascia. We haven't gotten to that
Mhm.
in the West, but
Mhm.
fascia is a piezoelectric organ inside of our
Mhm.
body that basically creates its own electricity. So
Yeah.
if it creates and moves electricity, and we can get rid of the adhesions and the blockages, well, we become, I would say, adaptable, maybe even superhumans in some way, shape, or form. So in order to become adaptable, we have to learn how to control our mind, control
Yeah.
our emotions, and control our body in ways that maybe has been forgotten in today's day and age, when everybody's sitting for 13 to 15 hours a day under
Yeah.
fluorescent lights. And yeah,
I agree. So when it comes down to understanding the environment, I like to think that we want to use that to understand our biological response to it.
for sure.
So some people can see it as an edge, other people can see it as self-care and a necessity, depending how much suffering they are into. But when it comes down to understanding our environment, what really gives us is an edge on understanding our own our own reaction to it, because everything starts from the environment that triggers a memory, whether that memory is ours or whether that memory was cemented in our brain 200,000 years ago. It creates that. We experience that, and there are certain frameworks that I go into to explain it. But what that does is that it gives us a neurochemical response. So we're talking about cortisol a lot in this podcast. We're talking a little bit about oxytocin, when we are surrounded by people we love, serotonin, when we are in the sun, exercising, enjoying the weather. We're talking about melatonin when we're sleeping. And then there's another one there I don't remember right now. But the point is that the neurochemical response is based on the environment we're facing. Now, what can we do to bring that to harmony? That's the key. And I think that's why it's so important to understand the environment. And just happens that the environment is seasonal, because what I find a lot is that people figured it out. Like, hey, you're suffering, you're struggling, 2 months go by, somehow you make a change, you figured it out. But once that environment changes again, whether it's in 3 months, 6 months, when eventually it's going to change, you live in a four-season state. Once that change, you think that you have to be consistent, right? Consistency is like one of those big ones out there. And it's like, this helped me, I gotta continue to do this. But guess what? The environment has changed. Your neurochemical response is different. So you want to understand what is happening so that then you can adapt and you can flow with that change in a measured manner. There can be a step by step process to it. So I think that we have uncovered a lot about the Tao, Jiu-Jitsu. I think of Jiu-Jitsu as achieving more with less effort. I think is one of those very, very visuals of how we can use whatever we perceive as our opponent. And a lot of people perceive their opponent as their circumstances, as their environment. In reality, it's there to help us, to if we know how to leverage that. So we're ending here the episode, and I just want to ask you one last question, and is that Number one, where can we go and find your help? I see that you have some links that we're going to be providing in the description down below. But if you can tell us a little bit about those three courses that you have, your book, I would love to hear about it, please.
Yeah, so I wrote a book. It's called The Tao of Jiu-Jitsu, and it's just like an entry level book for any, really. It's written for anybody. It could be written for people that do jiu-jitsu. That's what it's mostly focused on. But realistically, life is jiu-jitsu. So
Hmm.
if you learn how to take care of yourself, if you learn how to look at things in a more holistic way, you can play jujitsu with life. And in a way, yes, like you can use it as your opponent, but you can also use it as an ally as well.
Correct.
Because when I look at my people that I train with, I look at them as allies now because I don't compete anymore. So I look at people as allies for my growth and their growth, and also the growth of the sport. So I wrote this book on basically the philosophy and the principles behind my approach to jiu-jitsu, because I've been training for many years and I haven't been able to find this approach anywhere else. So I wanted to share it with the world. From there, I created a program called Breakthrough Breathwork, and it's a 7 minute a day program that I've shared with over 5,000 people now. I've worked with very high level entrepreneurs and athletes and Navy SEALs and single moms and single dads and just like people, right? But like also high performing people. And basically, what it does is it helps you to take back control of your life, like take back control of what you can have in the control. So it's like taking back control of your nervous system, taking back control of your energy, taking back control of your sleep. And it goes through very specific breathwork protocols to open up the different layers of biomechanics that I would say, in my experience, because I've studied all the breath work that I possibly could get my hands on in the world at this point. And what most of them are missing is the biomechanical aspect of where people breathe versus how to breathe. Um, then the next programs we started making was the bulletproof body programs, and we started with the neck. The neck mostly because outside of the lower back and the hips, the neck was the biggest problem that we saw in people. And a lot of it has to do with the modern lifestyle. And also a lot of it has to do with just there's not a lot of information on the neck outside of like there's the iron neck, there's a few neck exercises, but it's almost like this mysterious structure that's not really looked at. But when I meet a man and he has a well-developed neck, I know that man has the potential to be dangerous. And the reason for that is because your brain lives on top of your neck. And because your brain lives on top of your neck, this is very, very fragile uh, equipment that we're given, and just a little bit of can create some very, very serious problems moving forward into the future. So even if people don't have neck problems yet, which most of them do in some spectrum, they have some stiffness, some pain. Um, this will help them to develop that structure in the neck so that they can protect their brain. And also, I have a mini course in there to develop the jaw, because that has a lot to do with like the mouth, the jaw, the myofunctional aspect with the neck as well. So it's a very unique approach based on fascia, based on structural strength work, and based on principles that I've been able to collect and synthesize from many different countries and many different teachers that I've had the opportunity to train with and test this on thousands of students now. So we've had fun
I
doing it.
appreciate the angle of the book. Taoism of Jiu-Jitsu. I think that they go hand in hand. I appreciate it very much. I think it's such a fresh and assertive perspective. Then I appreciate the fact that, like you say, it's overlooked the neck, the jaw, and it has such a ramification when it comes down to our health, and we use it a lot. Like that's probably like you can be sitting and you're still moving your neck. Like you probably use your neck more. I don't know the studies, but you use it a lot, and I can see how having a neck that is fragile can also bring some sort of stress to our subconscious.
Yeah.
Like if you are strong there, I can see how it can have a positive reaction subconsciously to the way that we live.
Well,
So
because you're so much stronger that way. Like you're carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders, they say, especially as a
Mhm.
man. And one of the things that this guy recorded a video testimonial for me after doing the neck program. He had uh, neuropathy in his fingers from a stinger in his neck. So for 6 months, he couldn't feel his fingers. Athletic guy, soccer player, said. I said, "What was the first thing that you noticed?" He was doing it for 2 weeks. The neuropathy went away because he
Mm.
was hitting the right places in the spine. And he said, the first thing I noticed, I was able to have sex with my wife again because it was so painful to be intimate with my wife.
Yeah.
And then the next stressor, this one was big. So I don't think about I can't think of everyone's problem, but they're all unique, right? And he
Yes.
said, the things that took me 5 minutes to do before took me 30 minutes to do
Mm.
because I was in pain. I had to move slower and I couldn't play with my kids. So I felt like that relationship was deteriorating. I mean, these little itty bitty, I mean, they're big, right? But like,
Yes.
because I'm like, oh, I'm thinking of the structure. But for other people, they're thinking about not being intimate, maybe getting a divorce if that keeps going on, right? Like,
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, 100%. So I appreciate that because I think that we get a lot of the same all the time, like this franchise model of, perhaps just going to the gym and doing the same thing over and over and over again. And then here we are, um, ignoring parts of our body that are so important. So I appreciate that knowledge you're bringing to the Commonwealth of Humanity. I will link them in the description down below, guys. So if you want to check it out, check it out. It's in the description. So now, thank you so much, Rom. I appreciate it. I love every second of our conversation, and I know that we can go for hours, but I know
sure.
you gotta get going. So if you guys are watching, thank you so much. I appreciate you very much. I look forward to seeing you, and like always, keep it seasonal.
Thank you, bro. I appreciate it. This was fun.